Dear colleagues, a warm welcome, and we are glad that you could make it to come to our press conference today, Wednesday. It's a great pleasure and honor to me to introduce our panelists here. And I would like to start with Reverend Professor Dr. Sandra Beardsall. She's a member of WCC, Faith and Order Commission, professor of Church History and Ecumenics at the St. Andrew College in Saskatoon, Canada. Welcome. And I'm glad to introduce His Grace Archbishop Justin Welby, Church of England, Lord Archbishop of Canterbury, Primate of all England and head primus inter pares of the Anglican Communion. Warm welcome.
Thank you.
And His Excellency, Most Reverend Brian Ferrell, Secretary of Vatican's Dicastery for Promoting Christian Unity and Vice President of the Holy See's Commission for Religious Relations with Judaism. And His Eminence, Metropolitan Job of Pisidia, Delegate of the Ecumenical Patriarchate and Permanent Representative of the Ecumenical Patriarchate to the WCC. Warm welcome to you all.
Thank you.
And I would like to ask Archbishop Justin Welby, could you please begin with your statement? We will have all the statements one after the other, and when we open for questions.
Thank you, and good morning to you all. I was asked to speak for 3 minutes. I've put a timer here to keep me to time. I was asked to make a few comments on, if I'd had more time, what I might have said. The first thing is that our ecumenical unity begins with the nature of God. It begins with theology and Christology. And I mentioned Catherine Sonderegger's Systematic Theology, Volume 1, Chapter 1, which starts with the attributes of God: one God, omnipotent, invisible, and omnipresent. One God equals one church. More than one church, or communion of churches, becomes competitive church. And in competitive church, a bad church drives out good churches. It's sort of Gresham's law on money adapted to churches. Organic unity does not mean a united bureaucracy or even a united hierarchy or style of worship or common cultural assumptions. It means a profound love for one another that receives each other at the Lord's table. It means acceptance of ministry. It means assumption that we belong together to Christ and we treat each other as the Christian family. It is not identity, but community, unity in diversity. The second reason, ecumenically, for our unity is the nature of the one world, one creation, created by one God. A united church shares the pain of all churches and lives the service-led, foot-washing life of Christ. It cannot do this fully when it suffers endless division within confessions and between confessions. The third reason is the nature of the mission we have. It is one mission for one church. A church that cannot disagree well will have nothing to say to a world that disagrees with war. Theological alignment on the essential issues of creedal faith means much more than theological alignment on every issue. In short, disunity prevents our experience, our realization, our knowledge of the unfailing love of God to each of us. Disunity hinders our prayer because we do not pray as Jesus did. And disunity ruins the obedience of the church to transform the world because our disunity begins with disobedience and pride. Thank you.
Thank you. Most Reverend Brian Ferrell, may I ask you?
Very briefly, regarding the plenary that we've just had, we spoke about unity and our common witness in the world. I think that we did not do a great job because we could not, in a few minutes, summarize, present, describe so much that has been discussed in decades, years of ecumenical discussions. So it's very important for us to realize that we are in a process. We are moving. I think that at the beginning, in the particular case of most Catholic theologians and the Church in general, we understood unity as some sort of uniformity and everybody being like us. It has taken a long time to understand that that is not the case. That's why I prefer sometimes to use the word communion rather than unity, so that people don't think that we're all going to be the same, doing the same things, thinking the same way. It's impossible. It didn't happen even in the churches that St. Paul himself started. Unity is for the sake of mission, so that the world may believe. It is not something, therefore, that we do for political, strategic, tactical reasons, just to make ourselves better and better positioned in the world. We do it because this is the fundamental mission that Jesus gave to us. I can only say that as Catholics, we are deeply committed to the ecumenical movement. I would also say that it is a learning process for all of us. It continues. It has its ups and downs. We sometimes know what to do, sometimes, mostly, we don't. We are people of hope and expectation. We have no idea what unity will be like. We don't. It will be a gift. As Pope Francis recently said, it's not going to be a matter of our policies and our strategies and our work and our efforts. It is a gift. Thank you.
Thank you. Your Eminence, Metropolitan Job of Pisidia, please.
Thank you, moderator. We are gathered here in Karlsruhe as 352 member churches of the World Council of Churches, with our ecumenical partners, with representatives from other faiths. And as you know, the World Council of Churches was created in 1948 with this specific goal to work for Christian unity. This is our goal. And I think it's important. I was very happy that we had a plenary this morning on Christian unity, because during the last decade, sometimes we forget about our mandate. We become discouraged because of difficulties we encounter while being together, dialoguing together, and we start forgetting our major goal and start being activists in other areas. Of course, Christian unity includes many things, but it's very important to have our main goal, which is unity. And as I said this morning, for the last decades, the World Council of Churches, and particularly the Commission on Faith and Order, produced a very important major document, the Church Towards a Common Vision. And this is a short document which says what the divided Christians can say together about the Church, about the nature and about the mission of the Church. And I think this is very important to discover how much in common we have. Sometimes we see our differences as stones that do not enable us to reach unity, but it's important to look positively and to see sometimes the glass not half empty but half full. And this document is extremely important. We had also recently, a few years ago, conference on mission evangelism in Arusha, which gave the Arusha call to discipleship, Christian discipleship, and care for creation, and also care for peace and reconciliation in the world, justice and peace. Now, I think that we as Christians, we are challenged not only by the others. Christians are challenged, we are challenged by ourselves. Because if we open the eyes of what is happening here, now in Europe, we have one Christian country aggressing another Christian country. We see Christians killing Christians at the beginning of the 21st century, 1 century after so many wars that have been so dramatic in our common human history. And I think we have to start thinking, is this the way, is this the Christian witness we want to give to the secularized world? If it is not this witness we want to give to the secularized world, then we have to repent and we have to work for reconciliation. For me personally, reconciliation is the key word for the future of the ecumenical movement. Reconciliation between our Christian, inside our Christian families, reconciliations between our churches, reconciliation with the rest of humanity, and also, of course, the reconciliation with God's creation, because all the problems, ecological problems, are the problems how we treat God's creation. So this is why I think the theme of our assembly, Christ's love moves the world towards reconciliation, its unity, is a very actual theme. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Eminence. Professor Sandra Beardsall.
Thank you very much, and I'll read my comments to make sure I stay within the bounds. Well, thank you for this invitation to share some of my reflections, and I am particularly invited to be here to share some news from the Faith and Order Commission. It's an astounding privilege, isn't it, to gather with Christians from all around the world, as we do here at this World Council Assembly. I experience, as you surely do, not only the joy of meeting old and new friends and singing, praying, eating, and struggling together in a space of great hospitality, I also catch a glimpse of a world redeemed in these contexts and a church living in communion, a glimpse of a church living in communion, one family of God. Well, in 2025, Christians will mark the 1700th anniversary of the First Ecumenical Council held at Nicaea. And the Commission on Faith and Order sees this as an opportunity to remember, to reflect, and to renew the Commission's own mandate to serve the churches as they call one another to visible unity. The Council of Nicaea in 325 is foundational for Christians. It helped to define the edges and boundaries of Christian faith. It modeled decision-making. It confronted dissent. It learned by doing as it took the first steps to be a church in dialogue with itself and with the world. However, that council also gives us much to ponder: the role of state and empire in the church's life, relationships with other faiths, the ways our unity and disunity may be shaped by our economic and political contexts, the strengths and the limits of diversity. So we do not intend our commemoration to be simply a rehearsal of Nicaea, but to employ Nicaea as a founding story on which to build creative explorations of faith and unity. So what will we do as a commission? We hope to plan and cooperate with others in a year of events, not just a day or there will be one conference from the 28th of August to the 2nd of September for church delegates and online viewing. But we strive to create many opportunities, study resources, webinars, online forums, and local events. We will create an online space for advertising the events of others, large and small. Faith and Order carries in a special way the WCC's commitment to the unity of Christians. In 2025, we hope to engage with as many people as possible in many ways to re-energize ourselves for the task to which Jesus calls us, to love one another into unity so that we can truly love the whole creation together as it cries for mercy, justice, and peace. I hope it will offer another opportunity to glimpse Christians visibly in unity in a world redeemed. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Beardsall. Now it's open to ask questions to our panel. I have one question in the 1, 2, 3, third row, please. Behind you.
Well, I'm Dr. Link from the Catholic News Agency in Germany. Thank you very much for all your contributions to Christian unity that we heard this morning. But my question is, how can we get it in concrete terms? And on this, I have to everybody of you one concrete question. First, to our Catholic friend, what can the Roman Catholic Church do to overcome the condemnation of Martin Luther and all his followers up today?
Professor
There has to be a
Link,
public word.
I have to say this is the only question you may ask because we have so many others. So let's concentrate on that to a Roman Catholic representative, please. Thank you so much. Jan Dirk.
Yes, good morning. My name is Jan Habermann. I write for the EPD News Agency based in Frankfurt. It's a question for the Archbishop of Canterbury. The churches all over Europe lose members and influence and intellectual power as well. What can churches do to reverse this trend? What can churches do to fight against this trend, which might lead to total insignificance in the long run? Many thanks.
Thank you. Now, my suggestion is to start with Most Reverend Brian Ferrell to answer the question of Professor Link, and then we can go on. His Grace Archbishop, please.
Let me start by saying that I am not an expert in this question. There are so many technicalities around questions of excommunication and so forth. But put it this way, if the church excommunicates somebody and that somebody dies, the excommunication is gone. However, we have lived for these 5 centuries in a situation of defining ourselves against the others. We have gone through, with the Lutheran World Federation, we have gone through a wonderful and enriching experience of purification of memory about all of this, which culminated in the celebration in Lund. I can just say that at the moment there is a theological commission between Catholics and Lutherans studying the whole question of the excommunication. And it is expected that at some point they will put out a proper statement about that.
Thank you. Archbishop, please.
Thank you for the question. It's quite a broad question. How do we reverse the decline of practicing Christian faith in Western Europe? I think we have to be lighter on our structures and stronger on our love for the world in the way Christ loved the world. We must be seen as those who wash feet, not as those who judge and give orders. And we must learn to love one another and to show how we can disagree well. We must be clear on our faith and be strong on what we believe, but relaxed about our boundaries and frontiers. Our frontiers are barbed wire, and the barbed wire needs to come down so that people can come easily into the church without being judged, without being condemned, and knowing that they are loved and welcomed. And we need to demonstrate community. It's easier said than done.
Thank you. Now we are a hybrid press conference, so I have 2 questions online, please.
Thank you. This first question from Simon Barrow, agency Ecclesia, Scotland, to Archbishop Welby. In England, the mainstream media seems so far to have paid no attention at all to this world gathering of Christians in Europe, and the church press very little. How can you and other church leaders in your country seek to recapture the sense of truly global vision, responsibility, and energy of which you have spoken?
Could you just say the first bit? I didn't hear who had paid no attention.
Simon Barrow, agency Ecclesia, Scotland.
No, the next bit. Who did he ask by saying no attention has been paid?
In England, the mainstream media seems so far to have paid no attention at all.
Okay.
Please.
The mainstream media and the church media have... Is there anyone from the Church Times here? Oh, well, there. That tells you something, doesn't it? The mainstream media and the church media has paid very little attention. How do we re-establish that? I think that's something I feel that we have not, that it has to be seen that the church lives it for the media, the secular media, to want to cover it. And in my more cynical moments, I might say that we probably don't talk enough about sex. But that's not a serious answer. I am joking there, because I'll get into trouble from my press people. Seriously, I honestly think they will cover what we are seen as living. And if it looks like we're not living it, they won't cover it. It's down to us to make the difference. But I agree with the question. Thank you.
Marcelo, second question.
Yes, from journalist Win Houtman to Metropolitan Job. Do you feel that this assembly has done anything for reconciliation in Europe today?
Thank you for the question. Reconciliation is a process and a big journey. But you see, there were in the last past weeks, months, there have been a lot of people writing about the exclusion of the Orthodox Church of Russia from the World Council of Churches. Now, we the Orthodox are against the exclusion of the Orthodox Church of Russia, because if we want reconciliation, if we want dialogue, we have to have all the people inside. And for us, the Orthodox, it's very, as a church family, the World Council of Churches is very important because it is a place where we meet frequently. We, the Orthodox, are not able to meet so often all together outside the World Council of Churches. So for us, our presence within the within the World Council of Churches is an extremely important place of encounter and dialogue. And this dialogue, through this dialogue, the process of reconciliation can go on and bear fruits in the future.
Thank you. Now the lady in the first row, and then the gentleman in the second row.
Hi, Jen Haywood, the Fig Tree newspaper in Spokane, Faith and Values, USA. As you talk about, so often in the church, we like to play nice, and we don't really get that conversation with that which we maybe need to hold accountable. So in the global rise of the alt-right, in the global rise of those who are calling themselves Christian, and in my neighborhood, wrapping themselves in a flag and carrying a gun, is there not a place for us to say, is there maybe a place you're already talking about and working towards, that this is Christ?
Thank you. I would like to ask Sandra, Professor Sandra, to answer this question, please.
That's a very challenging question. Coming from Canada, we realize that same attitude is creeping into our own culture as well. I think it's taking us a bit by surprise, and so in part we haven't really addressed it. But I found even at this council that there were, while wasn't formally on agendas, it was part of the conversation and the discussion. Among, I'm not a delegate, I'm someone who came for the Faith and Order Commission, but among people that I was speaking with, a concern that, yeah, this is something we need to address, and the question of Christian nationalism arose at one of the workshops, and a need to investigate in what ways Christians inadvertently maybe contribute to the rise of this kind of behavior. There seemed to be a general agreement that none of us think we should be calling it Christian nationalism, but that's what they call it. That's what that group calls itself. So, my experience, but it's limited, isn't that we have made many formal attempts to address it, but I hear people recognizing it as a crucial issue for many places to start to consider.
Thank you, Professor Sandra. Now the second row, please.
Thank you. Aaron Hollander for Ecumenical Trends. We're all here in Karlsruhe engaging in the difficult work of healing relationships and building relationships between our church communities. But within each of our configurations of church, and not least those communities represented here, there are substantial divisions. There's grief and pain and anger, there's mistrust and betrayed trust. So I want to ask, what do you see as the relationship between the interchurch reconciliation process that we're engaged in here and the profound need for reconciliation within our church communities? What will you bring home from this assembly to aid in your approach to the divisions within your church communities?
May I ask Most Reverend Brian Ferrell to answer to this question?
Well, it's a very differentiated situation in the whole church. In a large church like the Catholic Church, you can hardly speak of one process or one path towards such a reconciliation. It has to be within the historic and cultural and social context. I mean, it's not the same to talk about reconciliation in Central America as it is in South Africa or in the Balkans in Europe or something like that. I think that fundamentally and in all things, the real answer, the wise answer when we face these huge problems is to go back to the simplicity of the gospel, because sometimes the words of Jesus in a particular situation, against a particular background, take on a wisdom that we haven't seen up to now. So my thought is, unless we are genuinely Christian, unless we have a genuine spirituality, all our thoughts and all our policies and all our philosophies and theologies cannot solve the human question.
Thank you. Now I have one more online question, and then the lady in the second row, and then we have to close.
Again, from Will Houtman, he writes for Dagblad, Church and Religion editor in Netherlands. The question is to anyone in the panel: does the term ecumenism of hearts means the ideal of visible unity is disappearing behind the horizon? If not, where could we go from here?
Archbishop, are you prepared to answer this question?
This Archbishop? Or that Archbishop?
Let's say this Archbishop.
Thank you. No, it's not disappearing behind the horizon. If anything, it's becoming, the need and the possibilities are becoming greater. And how do we bring that forward? I go back to Brother Alois in the last plenary that we've just had. We pray together and we worship together. I would also say that, as the Holy Father, the Pope, has shown so clearly, we serve together. And I would finally say we recognize, as Father Cantala Mesa de Renero said so clearly when he was invited to preach to the opening of the General Synod of the Church of England in 2016 in front of the Queen, he said, we suffer together. And where those things happen, there is no amount of talking and committees and so on that obscure our real unity.
Thank you.
Susanne Schneeberger from Ensemble from Reformed Church in Bern. I would like to ask you, a lot of members in the churches, they know that we have this gathering and they are waiting. They are waiting for a clear call, for a clear message. We are in the middle of climate crisis, of climate disaster, of different other crises, of the war in the Ukraine and of hunger crisis. What will be our message this evening or tomorrow evening? A clear one, please.
Professor Sandra, are you prepared to answer this question?
Well, only sort of. Well, the WCC Assembly is working on a message now. So in a sense, that'll be the clear message that comes from this group. And a message that we've seen a draft of that message, and it talks precisely about some of the issues that you raised, not as maybe as forcefully as you might like, so that may be part of your question. But just to talk about some of the work of Faith and Order, just more recently, Faith and Order has really become concerned that we need to work on ecclesiology, and I was so grateful that both Most Reverend Brian Ferrell and Metropolitan Job spoke about some of the work of Faith and Order on ecclesiology and on moral discernment. But a third aspect of our work has been to try to provide theological foundations for the pilgrimage of justice and peace, which led us through this last 8 or 9 years. And we prepared documents on care for creation, justice for creation, and on Christian proclamation in that plural world. And so we were really attempting to draw together the wisdom of the many traditions that make up the Faith and Order, that make up Faith and Order, to find, to help give Christians particular theologies that can bolster their efforts to live and work for justice and peace in a dangerous world. So I recommend those documents to anybody who wants to go a little deeper into some of the things that will come out in a brief way in the message of the Assembly, I think.
Thank you so much. I would like to hand over now to my colleague, Head of Communication of WCC, Marianne Eidersten, and she will have some important information for you.
Thank you very much, Klaus. We received many requests from media. When are they going to take decisions at the Assembly? And as you know, the Assembly is coming to an end. And today we have 2 business sessions, number 5 and number 6. And if you have not downloaded the app, I would highly recommend you to do that at this stage, because you have access to the documents at the same time as the delegates. And then you are able to read them, but be a little bit careful because it's not the final version, because they are going to be presented, discussed, and then approved. So for plenary number 5 and 6, we will continue with the policy reference committee's report. As you remember, also the strong voices from the youth delegations yesterday, it will also be continued to be discussed in the plenary today. We will continue with the finance report, the program guidelines report. For those who are asking what are they doing, it's mainly dealing with the strategies of the programmatic work in the World Council of Churches for the next coming 8 years. And then finally, public issues. And you have asked question, when do we have statements? There is 9 statements and 4 minutes. In total, 13 documents to be presented today and tomorrow. And you will also receive them as a draft, but it's not the final one. We have also the final assembly message to be presented for a second time and then approved by tomorrow. So stay updated with the website or stay in touch with me and my team to be assured that you have the latest material from the assembly. We have another thematic press briefing later today at 3:30, and tomorrow we are going to have a closing press conference, hopefully at 2 p.m. We don't know exactly at this stage because of the final business plenaries, but be prepared to join us at 2 p.m. tomorrow. And then the newly appointed Central Committee, they will meet tonight at 8 p.m. in Gartenhalle. That's not a public session. They are going to appoint a nominations committee because tomorrow it's the election of the new moderator and the 2 vice moderators of the World Council of Churches and the executive committee. That will happen between 3 and 5 p.m. tomorrow. And hopefully we are able also to organize a press conference with the newly appointed leadership, with the moderator and the 2 vice moderators and the acting general secretary tomorrow. So that's everything for me at this point, and thank you very much to all media following us. And even if we had a question, why are not media covering the assembly? I would say it's almost the same number of journalists covering the assembly this time as in Busan, although less than the assembly in 1968 in my country, Sweden, when we had more than 700 journalists. So we have some work to do. So thank you very much for me.